A former Bear might be about to beef up the enemy. The defensive line has 2 holes the clock is not going to forgive. And a $60 million tackle who knows Ben Johnson up close just hit the market. And everything points to that player coming to Chicago. 3 bombs, 1 shot to find out before everybody else. If you are a real Bears fan, you cannot click out of this video. Hit subscribe, smash that like button, and stick around to the end because the NFL waits for nobody, and Chicago does not either. News 1, Joe Tryon-Shoyinka. What I'm about to tell you right now is the kind of news that makes folks on the south side and the north side of Chicago clench their teeth and look up at the sky. Because there are few things more painful in football than watching a former player of yours end up in the enemy's house. And I am not talking about just any enemy. I am talking about Detroit. I am talking about the Lions. I am talking about the team that beat the Bears twice in the 2025 regular season and is still the most annoying neighbor in the entire NFC North. Joe Tryon-Shoyinka, the edge defender who was with the Bears last season, is on the street. And according to a report from Sideline Report published Thursday, March 19th, the Detroit Lions could be a real option. Jaleel Granberry, the writer of the piece, argues that since the Lions are thin at edge rusher, Tryon-Shoyinka could be a viable, if not game-changing addition for Dan Campbell's squad. Here's what I will say. When I heard that, the first thing that came to mind was not whether Tryon-Shoyinka is good or bad. The first thing I thought about was what that player knows, because a defender who was in Bears practices, who sat in on Ben Johnson's game plan meetings, who understands how Dennis Allen builds a defensive scheme, that player is carrying information. It is not like this player is going to walk in and hand Dan Campbell all the secrets of the building, but in high-level football, familiarity with the opponent's system has real value. And I want to ask you this, and I want an honest answer. Does it seem normal that the Bears let Tryon-Shoyinka walk without even making the slightest effort to keep that player, and now we have to sit here and watch the possibility of that same player putting on Detroit colors? I believe Ryan Poles made the right call not bringing that player back because in pure production terms, Tryon-Shoyinka did not show enough to deserve a big money deal. That player came into the league as a first-round pick in the 2021 draft with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and logged 4 sacks as a rookie. Then came a stint with the Cleveland Browns before landing in Chicago. The resume is that of a player with flashes of upside who never really turned into a consistent difference maker. Granberry admits that in the article, saying straight up that Tryon-Shoyinka is not a signing that is going to move the needle, and I think that says it all. If even Lions fans are not expecting this player to be a real impact piece, then the concern for the Bears is not that Detroit suddenly becomes some powerhouse because of this move. The concern is symbolic. It is about optics. It is about seeing a former Bear in Detroit blue sprinting across the Soldier Field turf next season, and that, Chicago fans, hits different. Now, the article itself points out that the Lions just brought in veteran defender Jay Wanham, but that there is still room to add Tryon-Shoyinka. None of this is a done deal. It is a possibility, and let me be very clear here. If Dan Campbell manages to talk Tryon-Shoyinka into joining his team, it will not be the end of the world for the Bears, but it will serve as a reminder of something this Chicago front office needs to be sharper about. When you let a player go, you have to be sure that exit does not help your most direct rival in any way. The silver lining in all of this is that ESPN, in its way too early power rankings for the 2026 to 2027 season, slotted the Bears at number 11, while Detroit came in at number 7. Reporter Courtney Cronin points out that this is one of the quieter off-seasons the Bears have had in a long time. That sounds optimistic, but reasonable to me. The organization does not need to panic because the core is in place. Ben Johnson is in the building. Caleb Williams is in the building. There is a winning culture now after finishing first in the NFC North in 2025. But quiet does not mean careless, and staring at the possibility that a former player winds up in Detroit is exactly the kind of detail that might feel minor today and turn into a symbolic storyline in October, when the Bears and Lions line up across from each other again in the regular season. So I will ask you straight up, does the idea of Joe Tryon-Shoyinka landing in Detroit bother you, or do you think it is way too insignificant to matter? Let me know in the comments because I really want to hear what Bear Nation thinks. If that caught you off guard, just wait for what is next because we are about to dive into 2 free agency moves the Bears need to make right now. And the clock is not waiting on anybody. News 2, DeAndre Hopkins. Why Cameron Jordan? There are moments in the offseason when a team can sit tight and trust what is already in-house, and there are moments when standing pat is exactly the mistake that costs you a season. I think the Bears are standing right on that edge right now, and there are 2 potential signings that could push the balance to the right side. Let us start with the offensive side. Rome Odunze, first-round wideout who arrived in Chicago with sky-high expectations. No question about the talent, real chemistry with Caleb Williams, but there is something the numbers just cannot ignore. Odunze faded in a worrying way at the end of the season. A foot injury in November, and over the last 3 games of the year, that player put up 41, 53, and then just 8 receiving yards. No touchdowns in that stretch. Meanwhile, Luther Burden III and Colston Loveland, 2 young and hungry names, were trending up over that same period. Let me throw this at you. If you are a young receiver and you know there is competition behind you gaining momentum, do you need to feel that fire? I think you do, and I think the smartest way for the Bears to light that fire under Odunze is to bring in a proven veteran who sends the message in every practice that nobody's spot is guaranteed. That veteran has a name, DeAndre Hopkins, 5-time Pro Bowler, a receiver who has been cooking defensive backs in the NFL for more than a decade. And yes, that player is 33 years old. And yes, that last season with the Baltimore Ravens was the worst statistical year of that career. 22 catches, 330 yards, and only 2 touchdowns in 17 games. The numbers are what they are. And I am not going to try and sell you a fairy tale, but I will say this with complete conviction. DeAndre Hopkins is not coming to Chicago to be the number 1 receiver. We all get that. Hopkins would be coming in as the teacher, the mentor, the one who shows Odunze and Burden on every rep what it looks like when the game is on the line, and Hopkins would come at a price the Bears can handle. According to SpotRack, the projected market value sits at just $1.48 million. On a roster tight against the cap, that is a number Ryan Poles can work with. There is a wrinkle, though. The Minnesota Vikings might also be in on Hopkins. The receiver has talked recently about wanting to reunite with Kyler Murray, that former Arizona Cardinals teammate who is now running the show at quarterback in Minnesota, and that makes me nervous. Because if Hopkins ends up in Minnesota instead of Chicago, the Bears do not just miss out on a mentor for their young wideouts, they also hand another potential weapon to an NFC North rival. But here is what I think could tilt this whole thing. The Bears' future is brighter than the Vikings right now. You have Ben Johnson. You have Caleb Williams at 24 years old with an arrow pointing up. If Hopkins wants a ring before hanging it up, and I am telling you that this player still has plenty of pride, Chicago offers a clearer path to a title than Minnesota. And if that was not enough to chew on, let us cross over to the other side of the ball. This defense needs a true impact pass rusher, and the name that makes the most sense right now is Cameron Jordan, the veteran edge defender who spent the last 9 years of a career with the New Orleans Saints. Jordan just turned 36, and when you hear that, I know some of you are raising an eyebrow. I did too, but hear me out before you toss this idea in the trash. Last season, Jordan played 54% of the defensive snaps and still finished with 10.5 sacks. For comparison, Montez Sweat was the only Bear to hit double-digit sacks last year with exactly 10. Nobody else on the roster got past 6. Jordan on the field for barely more than half the snaps matched Sweat. That is not a washed-up player. That is a veteran who knows exactly how and when to get the job done. And there is another piece that makes this connection almost too clean. Dennis Allen. The Bears' defensive coordinator spent 9 seasons with the Saints, and over those 9 seasons, Cameron Jordan was the best weapon on that defensive line. According to Pro Football Reference, during that stretch, Jordan racked up 92.5 sacks, 320 solo tackles, 129 tackles for loss, and 183 quarterback hits, and that player's PFF grade never dipped below 82.0 in that span. Not once. So let me ask, if you have a defensive coordinator who knows a player's skill set inside and out, and that player is still producing at a high level, why would you not take a swing? I think that Allen-Jordan combo makes total sense in Chicago. The projected price tag from SpotRack is around $6.8 million on a one-year deal. The Bears have only about $243,000 of cap space available right now, but that number changes after June 1st. And there are always ways to shuffle money around and make targeted additions. And if the risk level has you nervous, let me throw this in. Jordan has not missed a single game in the last 3 seasons. And the PFF run defense grade was 82.1, the 4th best among all eligible edge rushers. The Bears gave up 134.5 rushing yards per game last season, the 5th worst mark in the league. A player with that kind of run defense profile fits Chicago's needs like a glove. This is not a long-term solution. Nobody is saying that, but it is a plug-and-play move right now, a mentor for whoever the Bears draft, and a player who already knows Dennis Allen's scheme like the back of that hand. 2 possible signings, one that pushes the young receivers to bring their A-game, another that bolsters a defensive front that managed only 2.1 sacks per game last year. Good for 21st in the league. Neither one is signed yet. Neither one is guaranteed, and the clock is ticking. But here's where it really blows up, because if you already thought that was a lot, what comes next could completely change how we talk about the Bears offense heading into 2026 to 2027. Do not even think about getting up. News 3, Taylor Decker. All right, Bears Nation, we have reached the topic of the day, the one that has me the most fired up, the one I think has the biggest potential to reshape this team's immediate future, and it carries a name that, interestingly enough, comes from the other side of the NFC North. Taylor Decker, left tackle, former Detroit Lion, a player on a $60 million deal who just got cut loose in a way that was anything but friendly. Let me lay out the context first, because this story needs it to be fully understood. The Bears walked into this offseason with a massive unanswered question at left tackle. Ozzie Trapelo, the player who was supposed to protect Caleb Williams' blind side, tore the patellar tendon during the playoffs. That is a brutal injury, one that can knock a player out for most, if not all, of a season. So who is protecting Caleb Williams in 2026? Right now, the Bears have an in-house competition between Braxton Jones, Theo Benedette, and Jedrick Wills. I hear you. If that does not exactly fill you with confidence, it does not do it for me either. Benedette and Jones have left plenty to be desired in their careers, and Wills has not played a single NFL snap since 2024. That is not the group I want standing in front of the franchise quarterback. That cannot be the final plan. And then Taylor Decker hits the market, and I honestly cannot believe the opportunity that represents. Decker was Detroit's starting left tackle for years, entered this offseason in the 2nd year of a $60 million contract. But the Lions asked for a pay cut. Decker said no. The Lions, despite everything that player had done for the franchise, granted the release once it was requested, and now that player is free. Bleacher Report and a piece from Christopher Knox named the Bears and the Cleveland Browns as the most logical landing spots for Decker. And the main reason is not just the level of play. The main reason is Ben Johnson. The same person who is now the Bears head coach, spent years as the offensive coordinator of the Detroit Lions. The same person who drew up the plays Decker was executing every Sunday. I think that prior relationship is a massive factor. In the NFL, players follow coaches who know them, who respect them, who know how to get the best out of them. And if Decker has any extra motivation after the way things ended in Detroit, let me ask you this. Is there a better place to channel that energy than Chicago? I do not think so. I think a player who wants to prove something to a former team and has a personal connection with the Bears head coach is exactly the type of player who can walk in hungry and locked in on a mission. Now, we have to be honest about the numbers, too. Decker had a rough 2025 season, only 14 games because of a shoulder injury, and even with that injury limiting the player, the PFF grades came out at 69.5 in pass blocking and 62.1 in run blocking. 2 sacks allowed and 33 pressures. Are those perfect numbers? No. But when I stack them up against what Chicago has on the roster right now, the answer is pretty clear. Decker, even banged up, graded out better in pass protection and run blocking than any option the Bears currently have, and the gap is not small. It is noticeable because we're talking about protecting Caleb Williams, a 24-year-old quarterback with a ceiling that could define a decade of Bears football. You do not put a quarterback like that behind a second-rate offensive line. You just do not. Not after everything this city has waited for to see a signal caller of that caliber. So let me say this loud. If Ryan Poles does not at least pick up the phone and talk to Taylor Decker, that would feel like a missed opportunity because the market for quality left tackles is extremely thin. And when you have the perfect combination of need, availability, prior connection with the head coach, and extra motivation from the player's side, you do not just shrug that off. Bleacher Report wraps it up by saying the Bears would be the most likely destination, and not just because of the Johnson connection. Chicago gives Decker a legitimate shot to win, a team that finished first in the NFC North in 2025 with a young electric quarterback and a top-tier head coach. Detroit sits 7th in ESPN's power rankings. The Bears sit at 11, but that gap could be closed with the exact type of moves we're talking about here, and there is another angle nobody is talking about enough. Decker might want payback for how things ended with the Lions because in football, same as in life, pride matters, and if there is anything that can light a fire under a high-level offensive lineman, it is lining up twice a year against the team that let that player walk. Picture the scene. Decker in navy and orange, Ben Johnson on the sideline, Chicago versus Detroit at Soldier Field. That player is going to block like every snap is personal. And in football, that kind of motivation is priceless. Of course, there are real constraints. The Bears' cap space sits around $243,000 right now. That is not even enough to cover the ride from the airport. But there are tools, contract restructures, the post-June 1st relief that frees up money. Poles has already shown creativity working the cap, and I believe if the will is there, the path will show up. The question is not whether Chicago can make the dollars work. The question is whether Ryan Poles has the vision to understand that protecting Caleb Williams in 2026 is the number one priority of this offseason. Everything else, the draft, budget, free agents, internal development, comes second if left tackle is a glaring weak spot. The NFL does not wait. The Lions do not wait. The Packers do not wait. The Vikings do not wait. And in the NFC North, where every game matters and the margins are razor thin, you cannot roll into the season with such an obvious weak link on your quarterback's blind side. Taylor Decker could be the answer. And if the Bears do not move fast, the Browns or somebody else could snatch that player up first. So let me ask you one last time before we close. Should Ryan Poles go all in for Taylor Decker, or would you rather see this team ride with the in-house competition already on the roster? Because my opinion is crystal clear, and the city of Chicago deserves a response just as clear from Ryan Poles. Da Bears, Chicago does not play. All right, Bear Nation, we just went through 3 stories that have my heart racing tonight. And I want you to be an active part of this conversation because this channel is not a monologue, it is a family. First, straight up question, does Joe Tryon-Shoyinka possibly landing in Detroit worry you? Or do you think that move is so minor it is not even worth stressing about? Drop it in the comments. If you are in the camp that says any player going to the Lions is a problem, type problem. If you think it is a non-issue, type no big deal. I want to see that back and forth. Second question, should the Bears go after DeAndre Hopkins to light a fire under Odunze, or would that just be throwing money at a player whose best days are behind that career? And on defense, do you think Cameron Jordan still has enough juice to make a real impact in Dennis Allen's unit, or is it too risky to bet on a 36-year-old vet? Tell me what you think. This channel exists to hear Chicago fans, not just my voice. And the million-dollar question, the one that is eating at me the most, does Ryan Poles need to go all out for Taylor Decker before another franchise swoops in? If you think Poles has to make that call today, type call Poles in the comments. If you think this team can get by with the in-house competition it already has, type we trust the roster. I want to see which side wins out. Listen, let me say something from the heart. This channel exists because the passion we have for the Bears in Chi-Town does not fit in one chest. It is collective. It belongs to the whole city, from the south side to the north side, from Soldier Field to the Loop Bars, where we watch every game. This community is a family, and families get together to talk, to argue, to suffer, and celebrate as one. If you're not subscribed yet, this is your moment. Hit that button right now. I am not asking as a YouTuber. I am asking, as a Bears fan who knows we need more voices like yours in this conversation, drop a like if this video got you fired up, share it with that friend who also lives and dies with the Bears. And ring that bell because Chicago news does not wait, and I am not going to wait to bring it to you first. I am Miguel Morales. This is Bear Truth, Bear Down, Chicago. Until next time.